I want to also just welcome everybody online. Thank you for joining us online. And, you know, these words in this song have just captured my heart. We just produced this video. Our marketing department did this just a couple of weeks ago. And when I saw that video and heard the words, man, just something happened on the inside of me. Specifically, I heard these words in that video. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. Isn't that the kind of God we have that sends out an army? And I just want to say thank you to Bethel's Rock, to Pastor James and Heather for their amazing leadership. They're not just leading a church, they're leading an army. You guys realize that. You're not just a church, you're an army. And you're an army that has been making an impact. And some of you may not even realize that through your partnership with Convoy of Hope, all that you've accomplished. And I just want to show you, this is just for 2023, just this year alone. We're currently feeding 550,000 kids every single day in our children's feeding initiatives. We're across 33 different countries. We have 3,825 program centers where this happens. And again, let me just say, this is happening every single day because we're not the kind of an organization that pulls up and drops food out of the back of a truck and then leaves. We're committed that when we commit to one of the feeding centers, we're going to be there for the kids every single day. And it's amazing to see what God is doing through that. And also through our agriculture, we have already this year trained 25,000 farmers in 17 different countries. This is a really big deal because it helps in breaking poverty. It helps with food insecurity because we are training the farmers in their own kind of regions to be able to plant the right crops and know how to do it. And we're actually back at our home base reproducing a lot of that so that we can go over and teach and train. And so it's not just farmers you're training, you're helping them break poverty and feed entire communities. Women's empowerment, we have empowered 35,000 women and girls this year alone in 18 different countries. You're helping sow seeds of capital into the lives of women and girls. A lot of them, dad has left, husband has left, but because of your generosity, they're changing their communities. Disaster response, we've responded this year to 79 disasters. That's a lot of disasters. Whether it's floods, hurricanes, Maui wildfires. I can remember pastoring for years. People would come to me and they would say things like, Pastor Ed, what are we doing? What are we doing about a particular thing? And so you can rest assured that when there's a crisis that's taking place because of your partnership with Convoy of Hope, you're there. Just last month, we know about the crisis in the Middle East. And I know people in churches, they were like, what are we doing as a church? You're there. You're there right now. Within a week, we had containers that were going into Israel and Gaza right away to help minister to those that are in desperate situations. Our community events, I've got to apologize. Our numbers are wrong when this was done. They actually used old numbers where you see that number, 34,000 people served. This year, that was from a few years ago. This year alone, we've served 920,000 people, almost 1 million people that have been served. Salvations is not 419, it's 2,390 people that have given their life to Jesus. Again, it happens because of amazing leaders like Pastor James and Heather. I want to talk to you a little bit this morning on this powerful weekend, this incredible commitment weekend. I want to talk to you about how to turn compassion into action. When we talk about compassion, let me just kind of, from a biblical perspective, tell you what compassion is. Compassion is rooted in God's nature. It's this deep, merciful concern for the suffering of others. It's coupled with this commitment to act in love and kindness to alleviate their pain. So compassion doesn't just feel, compassion does. Compassion is at the heart of who we are as a follower of Jesus. It's not just like this virtue that we possess. Listen to me. Compassion is a living expression of my connection to Jesus. You can't be connected to Jesus and not be a compassionate person. You can't be a big person with a small heart. I've heard people over the years say, well, this is just the way I am. I'm just cranky. I'm just grumpy. And, my grandpa was grumpy and my dad was grumpy. We're just a grumpy family. No. When we're connected to Jesus, things change in our life. Things change on the inside of us. And now there is this compassion, this expression of compassion that we live with. Matthew chapter 9, verse 35. I love this portion of Scripture. It gives us a snapshot of Jesus kind of out in the field, in the mission field, if you will. And Jesus, it says that Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of that area. Let me just stop because that word all is so critical. That word all is important for you as a church also. And what I love about Bethel's Rock is that you're committed to the all. And that even what's happening here this weekend, it's not just about the us, it's not just about the we, it's about the all. It's about the whole world. It's about Acts 1:8. It's about Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. It's the all. Jesus cares about the all. Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of that area, teaching in the synagogue and announcing the good news about the kingdom. I love this. And he healed every kind of disease and illness. Catch this. Jesus didn't just preach. He healed. He brought compassion. The two go hand in hand. What good does it do if we pull up a food truck and we dump food out of the back if we don't share Jesus? And vice versa. What good does it do to share Jesus with people that are hungry and starving if we don't give them food? It says Jesus healed every kind of disease and illness. And when he saw the crowds, he had, everybody say it with me, compassion. He had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Another version says that Jesus was moved with compassion. And I want to just share three things that compassion does with you today. First of all, compassion sees the need. Compassion sees the need. Right now, your pastor just got back from Africa, and for Convoy of Hope, Africa is on our hearts. Because right now, the clock is ticking. We're in a race for hope. The realities are grim. The images are haunting. Parched land, skeletal herds, and sunken faces. The need is overwhelming. I could take you to places in Africa right now where 4- and 5-year-old kids have never felt a drop of rain on their face. They don't know what it's like. They've never seen rain in the sky. Right now, Africa is facing the greatest hunger crisis that the country has seen in more than 50 years, and nobody sees it. Everyone's quiet. You're not going to find it on the news feed. I checked again this morning. I go through a couple of different news feeds that I look at and read different things that are taking place, and it's been months. I've been reading nothing about Africa. And it's funny as we get into Christmas right now. I'm a Christmas person. Any Christmas people here? Like I'm the November 1st Christmas guy. Any November 1st Christmas people? Any post-Thanksgiving Christmas people? Let's see if we got. Like I'm the November, like our family, we're busting out the decorations November 1st, and I can hear the song in the background. Da, 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 da. Don't they know it's Christmas at all? Right? Do you know what that song's about? That song was written in 1984, and it was in response when they're saying, do they know that it's Christmas time at all? It's in response to the people that are in Ethiopia and the crisis that is taking place in Ethiopia. The song's written about that. During that time, 1984, 7.7 million people that were facing extreme starvation in Ethiopia. And it was from that song that birthed the whole movement for Live Aid in 1985, where all the bands came around and all the bands of the bands. And do you guys, anybody remember any of that? I'm dating myself right now. And so Live Aid came together, and it was all to help raise money for the famine that was taking place in Africa. 7.7 million people. But right now, listen, 23 million people facing starvation and extreme poverty. No one sees it. The world is silent. There are no songs being written about it, no concerts, quiet. But I'm so grateful that hope is on the horizon. Hope is on the horizon. I've been with Convoy now for a few years. I pastored for more than 30 years, was a partner with Convoy as a pastor. And I'm telling you that Convoy of Hope, we are positioned to do something significant right now about the hunger problem in Africa. In our partnership with churches all over the country, we believe that God has called us on this mission to do something. And you know, there's a refugee camp that's near a West African city. It's home to thousands of displaced people. And you can imagine with this particular refugee camp, all the things that go along with it, food and water and electricity, the resources, there's scarcity in resources, disease is constantly breaking out. And to help address kind of some of the problems, specifically with the lack of education, a few years ago, the World Bank came in and they built an education facility for this camp. But they discovered very quickly that the education facility doesn't do any good if you don't have food to give to the kids. Because the kids can come in, but they can only concentrate for about an hour at a time. And so this particular refugee camp, they were begging for help. Please send resources. Please send food. Please send these things. And here's the good news. Hope was on the horizon because this year in 2023, Convoy of Hope trucks came rolling into that camp. The trucks came rolling in, and when those trucks came rolling in, 400 kids came running out, and they were all yelling and screaming in French, "Merci, merci, thank you, thank you, thank you." And because of your partnership, on behalf of those kids, I say thank you. Thank you. As those trucks pulled in, the kids come rushing out, and the teachers are just, you can see the emotion on the teachers as there's a celebration. There's this, everybody's rejoicing, and they're dancing. And even the security guards that brought in the trucks, they had to be accompanied by security guards. Even the security guards that came in with them, visibly they were moved, they were weeping, and they said, "We have never seen anybody do anything like this for these people before." It's an amazing thing, the power of hope and compassion. But if you'll just stop, and if you can just see this image with me, you can see the image of the kids celebrating, 400 kids celebrating, and the food resources and the education, and you can see them weeping and crying, and the trucks being unloaded with food. If you'll just turn just a little bit, and you'll just kind of, through the lens, you'll just look, and you'll just turn just a little bit, you'll see outside of those fences hundreds of kids that are waiting to get in. Waiting. You see, compassion sees. Compassion sees. Here's the other thing. Compassion doesn't just see. Compassion feels. Compassion feels. It says that Jesus was moved with compassion. Those words, moved with compassion, means that Jesus felt a deep sense of empathy, this profound emotional reaction. Jesus felt it. Can I just ask you, when was the last time that you saw somebody that was hurting or broken, or you saw somebody in need, and it just like something inside, you just felt it? I just worry with everything that's happening in our world. It's like we become so desensitized. We get so distracted that our feeler gets broken. Because we're scrolling through our feeds and we're going through all of this stuff. And even when I'm thinking about the news, I'm like, there's nothing on Africa. No, we're reading about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. That's the stuff that occupies us. That's the stuff that we see. And something in the midst of all of that, it's like we are on information overload and entertainment overload, that something breaks in our feeler. But God wants to fix our feeler. God wants to fix that part of us on the inside, because compassion feels the need. And compassion feels the need. And compassion is the bridge that connects us together. It's not, I read this quote that said, compassion, listen to this, compassion isn't about a healer and the wounded, it's about equals. It becomes real when we embrace our own darkness and we acknowledge, listen to these words, our shared humanity. allowing us to be present with others in their moments of darkness. Back in August, I went down to Nicaragua to see one of our 3,800 feeding centers for our kids. And I went down there, and I walked in, and I was with a couple of other people from Convoy, and we walked in. It was so cool. They had, like, reserved seating for us, and, like we were important. I'm like, no, you guys are the ones that are important here. But we go over and we sit down, and there's, like, this kids service that's going on. They had just gone through their classes in the morning. It's about 11 o'clock, and so the kids are doing the songs, and in Spanish they're singing, "Rise and shine and give God the glory, glory." And they're singing the songs, and I don't know if you've ever been like on a trip, but sometimes those moments are awkward. Because I don't speak Spanish. I grew up in Miami, and everybody's like, you grew up in Miami, you didn't learn Spanish? I'm like, no, I did learn all the bad words. I know how to cuss somebody out in Spanish. But I never learned Spanish, right? It's like, rise and shine. And so they're doing it in Spanish, and I'm just like. And the kids are all there celebrating, singing, and then they do their games. And then all of a sudden, it's like 11:45, and one of the teachers comes out, and she starts yelling in English. She starts yelling, "It's happy hour, it's happy hour." I'm like, whoa, what kind of school is this? This is not what we were talking about when we talk about bringing hope. I realized what she was saying. This is the time of the day at 12 o'clock from 12 to 1. This is their happy hour because it'll be the only meal they eat that entire day. The kids all race around, all different ages, and they sit in their seats waiting for their plate of food. They came over and got me by the hand, and they took me to the back to the kitchen area where they wanted me to help plate the food. And there were these ladies in the kitchen, and this one lady starts showing me, this is how you put the rice on, this is how you scoop it, and then with the chicken. And so she's, there's a language barrier, but she's explaining it, and I'm watching. So I get the big scoop, I get the scoop of rice, and I put it on the plate, and she slapped my hand. And she said, no, more. That's the heart of Convoy. Not less. How can we always do more? How can we always do more? So she scoops in, and so I scoop in, and she's like, there you go. She was kind of gruff with me a little bit, I felt a little intimidated. And so I go out and I start taking these plates of food to everybody around. And I saw this one little girl. I passed by and I gave a plate of food to this one little. Do I have the picture right here? I gave this plate of food. Do you guys have that picture? No, they don't have that picture. Okay, there you go right there. Yeah, that picture right there. I gave this, don't go to the other picture yet. I gave a plate of food to this little girl. And like when I saw this little girl, like my feeler, like I was like, ooh. Like I felt an internal, like something happened. And the reason is because I have a granddaughter the same age, like right around the same age. And I'm looking at this little girl at happy hour. And this little girl, this is going to be the only food she eats the entire day. And I thought about my little 5-year-old granddaughter who can eat anything that she wants. Here's a picture of my granddaughter right here. You have the next, there she is right there. She can eat anything that she wants. And matter of fact, we're at the place now, like when we go places and we look at the kids' menu, it's like, here's a cheeseburger, here's fries, grilled cheese sandwich, a hot dog. She's like, no, Pop, I want calamari. What kind of kids do we have today? It's like, I want calamari, Pop. And so she can get anything that she wants. And something happened in my feeler. And here's what compassion does. It's the shared humanity. It's the bridge that connects us, because it's not just healer, us trying to help someone. We recognize, here's another way that I would say it, but for the grace of God, go I. That's somebody's granddaughter. And we're connected together there in that moment. And if we can't feel it, I'm saying, God, please help me. Fix my feeler. You know what? Compassion. Henry Newen said this. He said, Compassion asks us to go where it hurts and to enter into the places of pain and to share in brokenness and fear and confusion and anguish. Compassion hurts. Compassion hurts. Jesus was moved with compassion. He felt it deeply. Do we feel it deeply? When we see pain and we see those marginalized and we see the injustice, do we feel it deeply? Compassion feels it deeply. You see, compassion sees the need, and compassion feels the need. But then Jesus calls us to put the compassion to action, because if we don't put the compassion to action, we just have sympathy and empathy. But he calls us to take the compassion and turn it into action, and compassion meets the need. Here's another way of saying it. Compassion does something. Do you remember the story of the Good Samaritan? The man who fell among thieves and robbers, and he was beat up. He was left for dead. And Jesus tells this story. He tells this parable, and he basically says there's a pastor that goes walking by. Aren't you grateful that it was not your pastor? I'm so grateful for your pastor. Can you just give it up for your pastor? He is an amazing leader. Weekends like this show you how blessed you are. That he's looking at the all and he's saying, we've got to help the all. But Jesus tells the story, and he says there was a pastor that walked by and said, I'm sorry, I would love to stop, I would love to help, but I've got to get to church because I'm in the middle of a series on compassion. I don't have time. I'd love to, but I don't have time. I'm right in the middle of the series. And then it says that a church person went walking by also. The church person goes by and says, this is horrible. What a tragedy. This is terrible, but I have to hurry because I have my small group right now. We're praying together for the hurting people of the world. It's a prayer group. I have to go. I have to go to my leadership development class. I have to go to my next step class. I have all these things. I'd love to stop, but I'm so busy I have to go. And then it just says that a Samaritan came by. The Samaritan came by. And he stopped. And Jesus tells this story. And in essence, Jesus is saying that compassion doesn't just pass by. Compassion does something. Compassion reaches out in generosity. Compassion makes things happen. Your compassion, your generosity has been making things happen. Compassion meets the need. A few years ago, I was preaching at my church that I've been pastoring for 15 years. And we were doing a missions conference similar to this, and we were doing our weekend where we were gathering together. We were going to be gathering together, and we were going to do our missions commitments, and I'm so excited, and man, we're going for it, and we're pumped up, we're amped up about all of it. And so as we get ready to get to the end, we do all the commitments and everything. And there's this young couple that was at our church. They were newlyweds, had not been married very long. She was pregnant. She was like 7 or 8 months pregnant, something like that. And I knew that they were struggling. I knew that they had a hard time. I knew a little bit about their story and their testimony. And so they said, hey, Pastor Ed, they came up to me after the service and they said, can we just meet with you this week for a couple of moments? And I said, sure, yeah, that'd be great. And so they came in, and when they came in, they had this little Folgers can. You ever seen those did your grandparents have those little Folger cans around the house? Anybody, come on, anybody know what I'm talking about? I know people are watching online. You know what I'm talking about. There was a little Folgers can. They had a little Folgers can, and inside that Folgers can, they had some money wrapped in there, and so they handed me the Folgers can. They said, this is all we have. We're saving it for the baby. We have things that we need for the baby, but this is all we have, and we just feel like we need to help meet the need. We want to do our part. I was so overcome with just the emotion of the moment, and I pulled out a little piece of paper, and if I can remember the numbers right, I think it was $312.09. And I put that back in there, and everything inside of me just wanted to say, no, listen, no, we're not going to take this. We're not going to receive it. No, we can't do that. You're saving. Everything in me wanted to do that, and I just heard the Lord say, no. They're sowing. They're giving. This is what I've called them to do. I'm calling out the big on the inside of them. I'm calling it out. And so I took that and I prayed over them. I said, thank you guys so much. Man, this is awesome. This is absolutely incredible. So I went and told our team about it, pulled them all together, and our team gets together, and I told them the story, and they're like, we've got to do something. And so I said, pull up the Target registry. They didn't have a lot of family. They didn't have a lot of friends. They had this massive registry, thousands of dollars worth of stuff on it. And I said, buy it all. Buy every bit of it. Buy the stroller, buy the car seats, buy the playpens, buy all the toys, buy the diapers, buy the bed, buy all of it. So we bought everything, and our team wrapped it up, and we put it in one of the rooms, and that following weekend they came in, and I just said, hey, I just want to, come here, I want to show you something. And I took them to the back where our team was waiting. They walked in to all of these dozens and dozens of gifts that had been wrapped, everything that was, I said, we just took the liberty, and we just wanted to take care of everything that you needed for the baby. They just broke down weeping. And here's what I've learned. If you'll help take care of what God prioritizes, He'll take care of some of the things that you prioritize. You take care of the things that He's concerned about, He'll bless you. He'll bless you. He'll do big things through you. Back in 1992, I started out as a young youth pastor. And I was at a church. It was actually the second church that I had gone to minister at. And we came to a time that was similar to this, where we had a missions convention. We had a mission service where we were doing missions commitments, and we were challenging people to give. I had never been a part of anything like that before. And I was like, man, this is going to be awesome. This is pretty cool. I like this. And so I'm sitting there listening, and God begins to challenge me a little bit. Now let me just rewind and tell you another part of the story. I was young, married. We had a baby. I think my daughter, I think she was maybe like 6 months old. My son was 3 years old. And we had one of those cars. Has anybody ever had one of those cars? Usually one of those cars, it's one of your first cars. We had one of those cars that, I mean, we were struggling. We were like broke. We had nothing. We were struggling. It was one of those cars. It doesn't happen now, but it was one of those cars that when you turned the ignition off and you took the key out, the car kept running. Anybody have one of those cars? It was one of those cars, and the air conditioning was broke. And so it was in the middle of a Kansas summer, we would roll the windows all the way down. Our poor kids are sitting in these car seats. It was borderline child abuse, I think, driving around with them in this heat, and they're sweating, and I'm in a suit. And by the time I would get to church, the entire left side of my jacket was just sweat. It was blazing hot. And we would pull up in that car, and we would park all the way down at the end of the church because I was humiliated. I worked at the church. I was so humiliated. We'd get out of the car and we'd open the doors. I would go and walk around and I'd open the door. And the whole time, the key's not in the ignition and that car is mocking me. I'm taking my son out of the car, and I'm just got my head down. I've got holding his little hand. My wife is behind me. She's walking, and the whole time, it hadn't stopped. It waits till we get near the door. We get near the door, and all of a sudden we get near the door, open the door, and we hear, and smoke would pour out of the hood. Anybody ever have one of those cars? God wrecked me that night. I've told this story dozens of times. I just felt the emotion of it because something broke in me that night. And it didn't just break in me, it forever changed my life and the trajectory of my life and my marriage and my family, my finances, where I would go, what I would do. I sat down on the front row and I sat and listened to I can't even remember who the missionary was. And I was sitting there and we get to the end of the service. And there's an appeal being given, just like you're going to hear in a couple of moments, to do your part, to do something. And I sat there for a moment, and my wife and I had saved $1,000. $1,000 might as well have been $100,000 for us. Massive, massive, massive for us. We were saving for a new car. If that tells you about the kind of car we had, we were trying to save like $5,000 for a new car. We had $1,000 that we had saved. And I was sitting there in the front row and the Lord spoke to me. He said, I want you to give $1,000. My immediate response was, get thee behind me, Satan. That's not God. That's not going to happen. And I'm sitting there and I'm arguing with God a little bit. God, you ever argued with God when you're sitting there? You know what it feels like. In just a couple of moments, some of you are going to have this same wrestling match. And you go hear the same things. And you go say, no. And I said, God, he said, I want you to give $1,000. I said, God, that's all I have. He said, it's okay. That's all I'm asking you for. I leaned over to my wife. I said, I know this is crazy. I know this is just me and the pizza that we ate before we came. And I know it's not God, but I kind of felt like we were supposed to give $1,000. She's like, do it. Do it. I'm like, that's not what I wanted to hear. You get behind me too. We said that night, we didn't have Apple Pay. We didn't have text to give. We didn't have that. We had old school check. She took the checkbook out of her purse and she wrote a check for $1,000. We gave it. And man, it hurt. It hurt. I wish I could tell you that giving always felt good. No. Sometimes it hurts. Compassion hurts. You want to know the compassion meter in your life? When you feel compassion and you're called to meet a need, if it doesn't hurt, it's probably not high enough. People say give till it feels good. I say give till it hurts. Give till it hurts. We gave that $1,000 and we just believed. We were believing. We believed. I had never done anything like that before. We gave it. Less than a week later, her grandmother gave us a call and said, hey, I know you guys have been struggling a little bit, and I know you've got one of those cars. I want to send you $7,000 to get a new car. I want to send you $7,000. And here's what I learned, that if we'll take care of God's things, He's going to take care of our stuff. But it wasn't even about the car then, because again, I think the emotion I felt just a moment ago is just realizing the journey that it set me on, this missions giving journey in my own personal life. Because it started there and it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And I won't go into details, but I've done crazy stuff in my life, my wife and I, when it comes to missions giving. As a pastor, I've led the way. As a believer, I've helped lead the way. I've tried my best to be sacrificial. And I'm not saying this for everybody. I'm just telling you, if you'll prioritize the things of God, He'll prioritize and bless you. Today, I'm blessed. I'm taken care of. I have zero debt whatsoever. I have zero debt. I have my wife and I are living in a place where we are completely debt free. Now, let me change that. I have grandkids. I have young grandkids, so that probably is the equivalent of having a lot of debt. Because we get calamari and we do things like Disney World and things like that. And, but if you'll just take care of those things, take care and do what God is putting in your heart. If you'll do that, man, God will bless you. I promise you. I promise you. I want to close with these words, this story of Jesus in Matthew chapter 25. This is the last parable that Jesus will tell. The very last one. He's told a bunch of amazing parables, these stories that have illustrated kingdom truth. And he's painted such a beautiful picture of what the kingdom looks like and our responsibility as believers. And so he gets towards the end of his life. And in Matthew chapter 25, he begins to share this parable. And it's an analogy that he uses. It's a parable of bringing all the nations together. And he says, he said, I brought all the nations together and I separated them, the righteous from the unrighteous. He calls them the sheep and the goats. And by goats, I don't mean greatest of all time. But he separates them and he begins to describe what real Christianity, what it really looks like to be a follower of Jesus. And what's amazing in this story is he doesn't talk about our leadership development classes. He doesn't talk about assimilation programs. He doesn't talk about all the things that even me as a pastor that I thought were so vital and important. No. What he does is he says, I really want to talk to you about the way you treat people. And he said, this is the real measuring stick. And Jesus shares this parable and he says in Matthew 25, verse 31, says, but when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit upon his glorious throne. And all the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate the people as a sheep separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats at his left. And then the king will say to those on his right, to the righteous, come, you who are blessed by my Father, and inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. These words challenge me. When I read these next words, they challenge me to the core. For I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison. And you visited me. And then these righteous ones will reply, but Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you are doing it to me. Today, as a representative of Convoy of Hope, I stand in front of you and I stand in the gap as an advocate for tens of thousands, for the least of these that are waiting, the moms that are waiting. The moms that are waiting, and even today, they're making a decision. They have 2 kids, and they're deciding, do I feed this one or do I feed that one? To the farmers who sit next to parched lands, and they don't know where to go or where to turn, and they feel hopeless. To the women who have been marginalized, abused, left, deserted. They're just looking for a little hope. I stand in the gap for the least of these. A little girl came up to me a couple of weeks ago. I told the story about being in Africa and all the kids on the outside of the fence. They're waiting to get in. We have 400 kids that we're feeding in the center, but there's hundreds of kids that are outside the fence waiting to get in. And she came up to me and she said, "Excuse me, why can't the kids come inside the fence?" Just in her head, it just made natural sense. They should be able to come in. And I just said, it's because they're waiting for someone to help them. They're waiting for someone to help them. You know who the someone is? It's you. They're waiting for someone to help them. To respond in a commitment like today, to just simply say, I'm going to meet the need. I'm going to do something big. I'm going to do something big for God. Whether it's your Folgers can or whatever that is, maybe it's your first giving opportunity like I had back in 1992. Whatever that is, you're going to say, I'm going to do something because compassion does something. Let me pray for you. Jesus, today I pray for every single person in this room. God, I pray that you would bless them, but I also pray that they would feel the burden of the moment, the weight of this moment. Lord, I'm grateful for all the Christmas projects that churches do, and Lord, I've done them for years myself. We do toys and outreaches, and we bless kids, and we help kids, and we give shoe boxes with toys. And Lord, I'm grateful for all of it. And I know there's such an incredible need for all of these things. But today, when we talk about global missions for 2024 at Bethel's Rock, we're really, truly talking about lives being saved, transformed, healed, kids fed, women empowered. Lord, this community here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, being transformed. We're talking about lives that are hanging in the balance. And I pray, Lord, that you would help us to see the need. Help us to feel it deep inside of our feeler. And God, today, help us to meet the need. In Jesus' name, amen.